I'd assume virtually everyone who's been carnists for a long time has seen vegan called carnists hypocrites for not going to extreme lengths to avoid harming animals.
Then I would argue we must recognise, in virtue of being humans, that we are different to animals and therefore must treat them differently, not in a notion of radical equality.
I've got a question. What is that difference? What is the morally significant difference between an infant baby and a lamb, like you suggested, that gives us justification to stab a lamb in the neck with a knife, take their life from them, and for some reason killing that baby child, that human child, would be considered murder? But there must be some morally significant difference as to why it's not considered murder to take the life of that lamb. There are differences between humans and animals, okay? There are, but what is the difference that justifies us stabbing cows in the throat and not human beings? What is the morally significant difference? Yes, there's differences in sentience. You know, maybe this elephant's more sentient than a mouse, okay? But does that mean we should, you know, walk up to a mouse and step on them, kill them? What is the difference that morally justifies us stabbing cows, but not an infant child, but not some human being of lower sentience or intelligence, which there are plenty of them. We treat them morally and we assign them rights. What is the difference? It's a double standard. You know, not all humans are like radically equal either. You know, we're all,
there's a radical equality of species. As in, you've got the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, key word. But
exactly. Human supremacist rights, where we demand rights ourselves, but we take those rights away from animals, like complete double standard.
He seems to think he's hit a goldmine because he's smacked a few well-intentioned, most likely, but philosophically noobish carnists with it. Today it's time to crush his dreams by showing how easily carnists can avoid his charge of hypocrisy for buying meat. Let's get into it. Okay, so the claim is that carnists are hypocrites for viewing stabbing as morally unjustified, and industry deaths, in this case meat industry deaths, as morally justified. If we agree the two scenarios, meat industry deaths and stabbing, are either justified or unjustified, we arrive at a tetrachotomy of positions. Either both are justified, neither are justified, or one but not the other is justified. Now, none of these positions are necessarily logically inconsistent, but as I've said many times, I just task myself with showing the logical consequences of positions, then allow people to decide for themselves where they align. Top left says stabbing people is justified. Top right says stabbing people is justified, just don't you dare buy meat. The vast majority of people agree with me that murder is unjustified, so I don't see much value in spending time attacking these top two positions, trying to convince some fringe minority of lunatics to abandon them. The bottom two positions agree that stabbing is unjustified, but differ on whether industry deaths are justified. Bottom right, which finds murder and industry deaths unjustified, can appear upon superficial analysis to be more virtuous than bottom left, where most veganists fall, which is why vegans fall, who don't actually hold this position, love to assume this position purely for the purpose of attacking veganists. Why can't you veganists go a little further and avoid buying meat so less innocent sentient beings are harmed? This position stops seeming as virtuous once you explore its logical consequences. If we set a moral standard by which meat production is unjustified, it's hard to understand how the production of other food would be justified. And if the production of something as essential to our survival as food isn't justified, then it's hard to understand how most of our other economic activity would be justified. If we set this moral standard, we'd be talking about obliterating modern civilization. I'll term this view anti-civilizationalism. So the unpalatable consequences here become visible not simply from considering the effects of abandoning meat, but from considering the broader effects of the moral standard required to necessitate the abandonment of meat. Now, most people won't be able to get on board with the bottom right box because they have a strong conviction, rational or not, that civilization should be preserved. There are, however, people who would not be put off by the thought of losing civilization. For example, generally speaking, antinatalists and anarcho-primitivists would just bite the bullet and say, yep, modern civilization is morally unjustified. So I'll go one step further and explain why anti-civilizationalism is at odds with a value many of us hold, the maximization of net well-being. The universe has a certain ambient well-being to suffering ratio. Lots of the universe is just empty space, and then where sentient life arises, there are beings experiencing positive and negative states. Most of this life is trapped in a suboptimal state by virtue of lacking the ability to meaningfully change the conditions in which it exists. Intelligent life, however, is a special case. Intelligent life has the potential to create circumstances for itself and others where well-being is far higher. On my view, it would clearly be morally wrong to limit our capacity to raise net well-being. So we shouldn't trap ourselves in a suboptimal state. If we abolish human civilization, we're certainly trapping ourselves in a suboptimal state, similar to the state in which non-human animals exist. If we allow for civilization, we can move towards raising net well-being in the universe. Stacking up the wrongs humans do also doesn't really get you anywhere here, even if we go as far as to grant, for the sake of argument, the highly contentious point that human civilization currently generates a negative net impact on well-being. Because the universe will be around for so long that if we get our act together, we can tip our contribution vastly in the direction of maximizing well-being once sufficient time passes. It's the limiting of our potential to raise net well-being by trapping ourselves in a radically, judging by our potential, suboptimal state that causes me to reject the bottom right box. So we can say by process of elimination that if you don't align with a moral system that justifies stabbing people, such as the top two boxes, or one that mandates abolishing modern civilization, thereby permanently trapping humanity in a radically suboptimal state, such as the bottom right box, that you can place yourself in the bottom left box until some extremely unpalatable consequence of being in said box is made clear to you. And that is a demonstration of how veganists go about being completely consistent supporting industry deaths, and how positions other than this actually lead to crazy conclusions.